My husband was forcing me to name our daughter after his dead friend, but his brother asked why I thought she was dead. He brought it up early in my pregnancy, before I was even showing, and he said it like he had been holding it a long time. Monica, one of his closest friends, gone a few years before we met. I said no, not because I disliked the name. I told him I was not comfortable giving our first child the name of a woman I had never met, and had never once heard him mention until the day I peed on a stick. I thought he would be disappointed, and we would move on and find something together. That never happened. Every few weeks he brought her up again. Sometimes we would be talking about names and he would slide it in, and sometimes it came out of nowhere. In the car, at dinner, in the dark with the lights off. What about Monica though? Just think about Monica. You would love the name if you had known her. By the 8th month I was so tired of the same conversation that I would go quiet the second it started. But the thing that had begun to bother me was not the name anymore. It was that in 5 years together, married for 2, I had never heard this woman exist. I had met his parents. I had met his brothers. I had sat through college reunions and holiday dinners and long car rides with people who had known Leopold since he was 12. Not one of them had ever said Monica. At my baby shower, I pulled aside one of his oldest friends and asked casually what she had been like. He looked at me with a completely blank face and said he did not know who I meant. A close friend of his who passed away, I said. He shook his head and said he could not think of anyone. I told myself he just did not remember, that people forget, that a friendship from a decade ago does not stay bright in everyone's head. But I went home from that shower and sat in the car in our driveway for 10 minutes with the gift bags in the back seat, doing math on 5 years of holidays and reunions, and I could not make the number come out right. In the hospital, with the paperwork on the tray table and our daughter 8 hours old, Leopold asked one more time if I would reconsider. I said no. He said quietly that he had always imagined naming his daughter after her. I asked him why, in 5 years, he had never told me that. He shrugged and said he did not think it mattered. We argued twice more after we got home, and both times he said the same 3 things. You're making this into something it isn't. Why are you being so difficult about a name? She meant a lot to me. I don't get why you can't respect that. When I said it was strange that I had never heard her name in 5 years, he told me I was being paranoid, that this was postpartum talking, that I was not thinking straight. When I said I still wanted to know who she was, he asked why I had to dig into everything, why I could not just do this one thing for him. Every single time, the problem became me for asking. My own mother took his side. Maya called it sweet. She said it clearly meant something to him and I should let him have it. It was only a name. My sister was the only one who heard what I was actually saying. Camille said, if this woman mattered that much, why did you never hear about her once? And that is the part that is wrong, not the name. 3 days in, running on no sleep and cracked nipples and a house full of casseroles, I honestly did not know anymore which of us was the crazy one. Then his brother came by to see the baby. Leopold had gone out for food. Wolfgang was leaning over the bassinet making the noises men make when they are pretending not to be moved. And I asked him plainly if he remembered Monica. I said I was sorry to bring up someone who had passed, but I wanted to know what she was like, since we had almost given the baby her name. Wolfgang straightened up and looked at me. He said, passed? Monica didn't pass away. I said my husband told me she died a few years before we met, that she was a close friend. Wolfgang sat down on the arm of the couch like his legs had quit. He said, Monica was his girlfriend. 4 years. They were basically going to get married. She is not dead. She left him, and it wrecked him for a long time. I asked if he was sure. He said, I helped him carry boxes out of their apartment. Trust me, she is very much alive. So there was no dead friend. The grief, the tribute, the close friend gone too soon. The reason I was supposed to feel like a monster for saying no, none of it was real. Monica was the woman he almost married before me. The one who left. The one he apparently never stopped carrying. And he had wanted our daughter to wear her name for the rest of her life, and he had invented a funeral to get it. When he came back with the food, I said the word girlfriend. He froze in the doorway with the bag still in his hand. He set it down and said, who told you that? Not that's not true. Just, who told you that? I asked if she was alive. He was quiet a long time and then he said yes. I asked if she was his ex. He said yes. I asked why he told me she was dead, and he said, because I knew how it would sound if I told you the truth. I knew you'd say no, but it's just a name. It's not like it's not like that. He could not finish the sentence. I did not scream. I was too tired and too finished for that. I filled out the rest of the paperwork myself, and I gave our daughter the name I chose, Esperanza, a name that was ours and borrowed from no one. And he watched me write it and said, one more time, you're making this into something it isn't. That should have been the end. It was not, because a week later his phone lit up face up on the counter with a number I had never seen, and he crossed the room fast to take it into the garage, and I stood there with a bottle warming in my hand and understood that I was not done. I was done asking, though. The last time I asked him a question, he lied to my face for 9 months. So this time I decided I would have the answers before I opened my mouth. That night I lay next to him and waited. He scrolled for a while, plugged the phone in on the nightstand, rolled over, and his breathing went heavy in 10 minutes. I waited 15 more. He had not changed his passcode yet. I went straight to recent calls and there it was. The same number, 6 times in 10 days. Every one of them outgoing. The first was placed the same week Esperanza was born. Some were 2 minutes. One was almost 20. He had been dialing that number while I was in the next room bleeding through pads, while I was feeding our daughter at 3 in the morning, while I was crying in the bathroom because I thought I was losing my mind over a name. It was not saved under anything, just raw digits, sitting there naked. I screenshotted every call, sent them to myself, deleted nothing, and put the phone back exactly where it had been, plugged in, face down. He never moved. I lay in the dark a long time after that, listening to a man breathe beside me and feeling like I had never met him. In the morning, the second the shower turned on, I called Camille and told her all of it. She said, 6 calls in 10 days to someone you have never heard of after what he just pulled? That is not nothing. She had a reverse lookup app she used for work. Send me the number, she said. I will find out who it belongs to. I sent it before the water shut off, and then I sat with my thumb hovering over the screen like the answer might arrive if I stared hard enough. Then I sat at the dining table with the baby on my chest and watched my husband come out with wet hair, kiss Esperanza's head, pour coffee, ask if I slept okay, mention groceries, like any other morning, like there was not a single thing wrong. Camille called back within the hour after he left. She did not say hello. She said, "It is registered to a woman." Then she read me the name, Monica. I stood there holding the phone with one hand and the edge of the counter with the other, and the room went sideways for a second. Not a coworker, not a wrong number, the dead woman. Camille said, "Are you still there?" I said yes. She said, "What are you going to do?" I said I did not know yet, but I knew one thing, and that was that he would not find out what I had. That evening at dinner I asked him, in the flattest voice I could manage, if he had talked to Monica since she left him. He stopped chewing. His face did not move at all. He set his fork down and said, "No, I have not spoken to her in years. Why are you still on this?" He said it smooth and easy, and he looked me right in the eyes while he did it. No pause, no flinch, nothing. If I had not seen those 6 calls myself, I would have believed him completely, and that was the part that frightened me. Not that he could lie, that he could do it that well. I said, "Okay, I just wanted to ask," and he picked his fork back up and asked if we could please move past this. He wanted to focus on the family, on Esperanza, on us. And he smiled at me, the good smile, the one that used to make me feel safe. I smiled back. Something cold locked into place behind my ribs. For the next 2 days, he was the best husband I had ever had. He brought me food before I said I was hungry. He got up at 2 in the morning and whispered, "I've got her. Go back to sleep." He did laundry. He wiped counters. He came up behind me at the sink and told me I looked beautiful. And if I had not known what I knew, it would have felt like a man finally waking up. Instead, it felt like fresh white paint going over a wall that was rotting underneath. On the second night, I reached for his phone and the code was wrong. I tried again, slower. Wrong. In the morning, I said, casually, that I had tried to use his phone and it would not open. And he said, buttoning his shirt in the mirror without looking at me, "Oh yeah, I updated it for security. I'll tell you later." He did not tell me later. Not that day, not the next, not the one after. I told Camille I was losing ground. She said, "No. People with nothing to hide do not change their passwords the same week their wife starts asking questions. He does not know what you found, but he can feel you pulling away. And instead of telling you the truth, he is locking doors and bringing you snacks." Then she said the thing that actually landed. She said, "Stop chasing evidence and decide what you want, because saving this marriage and getting the truth might be 2 different things." That afternoon, Maya called to check on the baby, and in the middle of talking about feeding schedules, she said, "You know, Leopold seems like he is really stepping up. He called me yesterday and told me how much he loves being a father. He said Esperanza has changed him. He was so sweet about it." I almost laughed. He was not just performing for me. He was building a wall out of other people's good opinions, so that when this finally cracked open, my own mother would say, "But he called me last week and he sounded so happy. Are you sure you're not overreacting?" I said, "Yeah, he has been great," and I let it sit. It was not time yet, and when it was, I wanted every piece of it laid out so clean that his version had nowhere to stand. That night, he took the trash out and did not come back. I dried my hands and walked toward the garage door and heard him before I got there. Low, not whispering exactly. Soft, the way you talk when the sound is only meant for one person. I pressed my ear closer. I could not make out whole sentences, just the shape of them, the rise and fall. There was no work in that voice, no rush. It was slow and warm and easy, and I had not heard it aimed at me in months. Then he laughed, quiet, almost under his breath. The laugh you give when someone says a thing only the two of you would understand. And then, clear enough through the door, he said, I know. I think about that too. I stood there with my hand on the door frame and did not breathe. When his voice picked up and he said he had to go, I stepped back fast and quiet and was at the counter wiping a clean surface when the door opened. He tossed something in the recycling and said, sorry, got a call out there. Coworker needed to go over a project. I said, no problem. He walked past me to check on the baby in her swing, and I stood there holding a dry towel and thinking, you just gave me everything and you have no idea. I was going to sit him down the next day. I had it planned out, the order, the words, the screenshots. Then he came into the room already dressed and said, oh, I forgot. My parents are coming for dinner tonight. My mom has been asking about Esperanza nonstop. I said, you already told her yes? He said it was his mother. He did not think he needed permission, and he walked out with his coffee. I called Camille ready to postpone, and she said his family being in the room was better, not worse, because Wolfgang already knew the truth and I would not be alone. She said, he has been lying to you in every room of that house, in front of everybody. Why do you owe him privacy? Why does he get to pick the setting? She told me I did not have to raise it myself, but if it came up, not to run. His parents arrived on time. His mother went straight for the bassinet with her arms already out. His father said the house looked nice. Wolfgang sat at the end of the table and kept his eyes on his plate. For 15 minutes it was completely normal, and then his mother looked down at the baby on her lap and said, she is so beautiful. What made you choose the name Esperanza? Something pulled tight behind Leopold's eyes. Before I could open my mouth, he said, we just liked it. Flat and fast, a door closing. But she was not reading the room. She bounced the baby on her knee and said, I thought you wanted to name her after your friend. What was her name? Monica? The table went still, not quiet. Still. Leopold's fork stopped in the air. Wolfgang stared at his plate like he could burn through it, and Leopold looked at his brother. Not a glance, but a glare, sharp and fast. The look that says, I know you did this. Except Wolfgang had not done it. His mother had gotten that name from Leopold himself, months ago, back when he was telling everyone who would sit still what he was going to call his daughter. She kept going, still smiling. Whatever happened with that? You talked about it for months. You said it was important to you. Leopold put his fork down and said, we decided to go a different direction. Can we not do this right now? Not loud. Hard, like a door slamming. Her smile fell and she looked at me and then back at him and then down at the baby. And the rest of dinner was everyone politely pretending nobody had broken anything. After they left, he came around the corner and said, did you say something to my mother about the name? I put the rag down. I said, your mother brought it up herself. She said you talked about it for months. Who were you talking to? Because you told me Monica was a dead friend. Were you telling your mother the same lie? Or does she know exactly who Monica is? His jaw went tight enough that I could see the muscle move. He said, you are doing this on purpose. You are trying to turn my family against me. I said, I am asking you a question. That is all I have ever done. And every single time you make me the problem for asking. He walked away down the hallway, the way he always did. Like leaving a conversation ends it. It did not end it. In the morning, I called Camille and told her it was happening today. She said she would be there by noon. Then I called Wolfgang and told him I needed him in the room, not to gang up on his brother, but because Leopold would twist it if it was just my word. He was quiet a long time. Then he said, he is my brother, but what he is doing is not right. I will be there. Camille arrived at noon with a bag of food I had not asked for, and held the baby without saying much, because she did not need to. Wolfgang came 20 minutes later and knocked even though the door was unlocked. They were both sitting in my living room when Leopold's car pulled in at 4:10. He got 2 steps into the hallway before he saw us, and stopped dead with his bag still on his shoulder, and his key still in his hand. He looked at me, then at Camille, then at his brother. He said, what is this? I said, sit down, Leopold. He dropped his bag and sat on the edge of the couch and said, if this is about the name again, I am done talking about it. I said, this is not about the name. I said, this is about the 6 calls you made to Monica in the 10 days after our daughter was born. This is about the call you made to her the night before our wedding. This is about the call I heard through the garage door 3 nights ago, when you told her you think about it too. The color went out of his face like someone pulled a plug behind his skin. His eyes went to Wolfgang, not to me. He said, you told her about the wedding call. Wolfgang did not flinch. He said, someone had to, because you never would. And that was the first I heard the whole shape of it, because Wolfgang kept going, told the room what he had told nobody in 2 years, that he had come out onto the back porch at 1 in the morning the night before my wedding, and found his brother on the steps with the phone against his ear, talking low. slow, hanging up fast when he saw him. That Leopold had said it was just to say goodbye. That what he had actually said to her was that he was getting married, and then he had asked her if she was happy. Wolfgang said, "That is the part that got me." He was not saying goodbye. He was checking if the door was still open. Leopold tried to flip it, the way I knew he would. He said, "You went through my phone. You are spying on me now." I said, "I saw a number light up on our counter, and I looked it up, and it was Monica. And 3 days ago you looked me in the eyes and told me you had not spoken to her in years." He ran a hand down his face and said, "Those calls were nothing. I just needed to close that chapter." Camille said from beside me, steady and flat as a knife laid on a table, "You said that before your wedding. That was 2 years ago. When does the chapter actually close?" He stood up and paced and said we did not understand, that I did not know what it was like when she left, that he had loved her and she disappeared without giving him a reason. His voice cracked on the last word. A month earlier, that crack would have made me reach for him. I said, "So you married me, and you tried to put her name on our daughter, and you called her from our house while I was in the next room feeding your baby. Is that what I am, Leopold? The life you're living while you wait for her to come back?" He stopped by the window with his arms at his sides, and for the first time since I had known him, he had nothing ready. No spin, no version where he was reasonable, and I was the problem. The room was quiet enough to hear Esperanza making small sounds in her bassinet. He looked at the floor and said something so soft I nearly missed it. He said, "I called her after Esperanza was born because I wanted to tell her I named my daughter after her." He paused, and his voice went smaller. "And when you chose a different name, I called her again to tell her I was sorry that I could not make it happen." Nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The words hung in the middle of the room like something that had been buried a long time and had finally worked its way up through the dirt. Wolfgang put his face in his hands. Camille reached over without looking and took my hand and held on tight. He had called the woman who left him to announce that our child would carry her name, and when I signed a different one, he had called her back to apologize. He was sorry. To her. For me. I let go of my sister's hand and stood up and lifted my daughter out of the bassinet, and she made that half-cry babies make when you move them, and then settled against my shoulder with her fingers curled into my shirt. I turned around and looked at my husband. I said, "You apologized to her because your wife would not name your child after her. You were sorry to her. Never once to me." His lips parted and no sound came out, and I think even he knew there was nothing left to put there. I said, "Her name is Esperanza. It means hope. I chose it because when she was born I still had some." My voice did not shake, which surprised me. I said, "I do not know if I have any left for you, but every decision I make from here is for her. Not for you, not for Monica, for her." I walked past him and he did not reach for me. Camille told me later that he sat back down and stared at the wall and did not say one word to either of them, like a man who had finally run out of stories. Wolfgang left without saying goodbye to his brother. Camille came down the hallway a few minutes after and stood in the bedroom doorway with her eyes red and told me I already knew what I needed to do, and that she would be right there when I did it. Then the front door closed and the house went quiet, and it was the two of us, and the wall between us and him. I closed the bedroom door. The lamp was low, and my daughter's hand was closed around my finger.